You need to leave the aircraft now. Ma'am. The woman in seat 2A kept her boarding pass flat in her hand. The paper was folded once. Clean edge. No tear. The seat number was still visible. 2A. Beside the aisle. Sylvia Trent held the crew tablet against her hip. The screen was awake. For 1 second, it faced the cabin. Arden. Camille. Seat 2A. Paid. Confirmed. Below that, another field sat open. Seat change reason. Blank. Captain Martin Hale stood near the forward galley with one hand on the cabin wall. The aircraft door was still open behind him. A ramp agent waited outside the threshold with a headset pressed to one ear. Boarding was complete. The door was waiting to close. Sylvia angled the tablet toward her chest. You refused a crew instruction, Captain Hale said. The woman looked from the boarding pass to the tablet. What was the instruction based on? Sylvia's jaw tightened. Ma'am, we are past that point. On the lower corner of the tablet, a small flag flashed once. Restricted governance profile. Then Sylvia's thumb covered the corner. In seat 2B. Leonard Voss adjusted his cuff without looking up. Grey suit. Polished shoes. Silver watch. His glass of water sat untouched on the side table. The seat beside him, 2A, had been quiet since boarding. A laptop bag rested beneath the ottoman. A navy blazer lay folded across the woman's knees. Her white blouse was uncreased. Her hands stayed still around the boarding pass. 2 airport security officers stood at the aircraft door. Gareth Cole entered first. Broad shoulders. Tired eyes. Black shoes making a dry sound against the cabin floor. Julian Park followed half a step behind him. Younger. Quieter. His eyes moved before his mouth did. He looked at the woman. Then at the boarding pass. Then at Sylvia's tablet. The blank reason field was still visible at the edge of the screen. Gareth stopped beside row 2. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. May I ask why? The question was calm. A passenger in row 1 lowered a magazine. A phone lit in row 3 and stayed low against someone's thigh. Behind the forward curtain, Mina Ortiz stood with a stack of service napkins in both hands. She had heard the earlier exchange. The woman in 2A had asked for the reason twice. No answer had been entered. Captain Hale looked toward the open door. We are already delayed. The woman nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. Was there a safety issue? No one answered. A ticketing issue. Sylvia looked toward Leonard Voss. He kept reading the safety card. A documented accommodation. Captain Hale exhaled. This is a compliance matter now. The woman placed the boarding pass into the side pocket of her laptop bag. Slowly. Flat. Careful. Then she stood. She did not touch Leonard's side table. She did not reach for the crew tablet. She did not raise her voice. She picked up her coat. Julian stepped back to give her room. Gareth did not. As she reached the aircraft door, the woman turned slightly toward the cabin. Please document who requested the seat change and why. Sylvia's face changed first. Only by a little. Captain Hale looked at the tablet. The reason field was still blank. Mina Ortiz held the napkins too tightly. One corner bent under her thumb. Leonard Voss lowered the safety card by half an inch. Outside the aircraft, the jet bridge lights were bright and still. The woman stepped through the doorway between the 2 officers. Behind her, seat 2A remained empty. The system still showed it, confirmed. The jet bridge was colder than the cabin. Camille Arden walked between Gareth Cole and Julian Park, with her coat folded over one arm and her laptop bag against her side. Behind her, the aircraft door stayed open. A ramp light flashed against the small jet bridge window. The white side of the aircraft reflected it back in pieces. Gareth walked half a step ahead. Julian stayed beside her. He did not touch her elbow. At the end of the jet bridge, 2 airport employees waited near the service door. One held a tablet. The other had a folder pressed to her chest. The woman with the folder looked at Gareth. "Is this the passenger?" Gareth checked the report on his phone. Camille Arden, removed from Flight 618 for failure to comply with seating reassignment. Camille turned her head slightly. "Please include that I left voluntarily." Gareth paused. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he typed, "Noted." Julian watched the addition go into the security note. The woman with the folder looked at Camille's blazer, then at the laptop bag, then at the small suitcase beside her foot. Her expression changed for less than a second. Not enough to become a statement. Enough to become a record in Camille's mind. Camille looked at the tablet in the employee's hand. "I would like the incident number, the names of airline employees involved, and confirmation that the original seat change request is attached." The woman blinked. Most passengers asked about a new flight. Most asked about vouchers. Most asked when they could go home. Camille asked for the file. "We can take you to the security office first," the woman said. Camille nodded. "Then please make sure the request is preserved." They moved past the gate podium. Passengers in the terminal had started watching. Some stood near the windows. Some pretended to read departure boards. A few phones were already raised low, close to jackets and purses. At the counter, Nora Bell stood with both hands near the keyboard. Her professional smile was gone. She had processed the manual seat change before security was called. She had entered the reassignment after Leonard Voss spoke to the crew. She had not opened the policy tab. She saw Camille pass. Camille did not look angry. That made Nora look down first. Evan Roark stood near the gate printer. A report sheet had started to curl from the tray. He tore it off and held it without reading. Sylvia Trent appeared at the top of the jet bridge behind them. Her tablet was still tucked against her side. She looked toward Nora, then toward Evan, then toward the aircraft. No one spoke Leonard Voss's name. That was the first silence Julian noticed. Inside the small security office, the air was dry and bright. A metal table stood under a clock. 2 plastic chairs faced each other. A locked cabinet sat against the wall. Camille placed her coat across the back of one chair and sat down before anyone asked. Gareth opened the incident form. "For the record," he said, "you were removed after refusing to comply with a seating reassignment. That is incomplete." Gareth looked up. Julian stayed near the door. Camille folded her hands on the table. The reassignment had no safety basis. No ticketing basis. No documented accommodation basis. It was requested by another passenger. I asked for the reason. No one entered one. Then my question became non-compliance. Gareth's pen stopped. Julian looked at the airline report on the table. It was short. Too short. Gareth asked the form questions. "Did you raise your voice?" "No." "Did you threaten crew?" "No." "Did you refuse to leave when security arrived?" "No." "I left voluntarily." Julian remembered her at the aircraft door. He remembered the sentence. "Please document who requested the seat change and why." Gareth wrote more slowly now. Outside the office, the airport kept moving. Wheels rolled over tile. A child cried near another gate. An announcement called a boarding group for a different city. Cammie's phone lit once on the table. Julian saw only part of the message before the screen dimmed. Funding review, pending your confirmation. Camille turned the phone face down. Gareth saw the motion. His voice changed by 1 degree. Ms. Arden. Is there someone we should contact? Camille looked at him. No. She placed both hands flat on the table. They will contact you. The call reached the gate before the aircraft moved. Nora Bell answered with one hand on the counter and the other near the keyboard. Gate 14, she said. She listened. Her posture changed first. Then her eyes moved toward Evan Rourke. Yes, she said. She was removed. Pause. No. The aircraft has not pushed back. The gate printer started again. One sheet came out, then another. Delay forms, crew timing forms, a hold notice. Evan took the phone from her. This is Evan Rourke. He listened for a few seconds. His jaw tightened. Compliance. Nora looked toward the jet bridge. Sylvia Trent had returned from the aircraft door. She stood near the podium with her crew tablet held close to her body. Evan covered the phone. Who requested the seat change? Sylvia blinked. What? Who requested the change from seat 2A? Sylvia looked toward the aircraft. Her eyes moved too quickly. It was a seating accommodation. That is not what I asked. Nora looked down at her keyboard. Sylvia's fingers tightened around the tablet. Mr. Voss requested additional privacy. Evan's voice dropped. And what did Ms. Arden do wrong before that? Sylvia did not answer. The delay paperwork kept printing. Evan looked at the tablet in her hands. Did you enter a policy reason? Sylvia turned the screen slightly inward. Crew instruction became the issue. Before that, again. No answer. Because there was no clean answer. Not one that could sit inside a compliance file without leaving a mark. A woman in the gate area asked whether the flight would still leave. No one answered her. The departure screen still showed boarding complete. The jet bridge still had not cleared. Inside the security office, Gareth Cole's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Then at Camille Arden. Cole. He listened. Julian Park watched his face. Gareth sat straighter. Yes, she is here. Another pause. No physical resistance. He looked at his notes. No raised voice documented. He looked at Camille. Yes. She requested full documentation. Gareth ended the call and placed the phone beside the incident form. Corporate compliance wants the complete account. Camille nodded once. They also asked if you want to return to the aircraft. Julian looked at her. The question hung in the small room. The metal table reflected the overhead light. Camille's boarding pass lay beside the airline report. One document, with the seat still confirmed. One report calling her non-compliant. She looked at both. No, she said. Gareth waited. Camille added, not tonight. Julian's eyebrows moved slightly. Camille looked toward the closed office door. I do not need that seat anymore. No one spoke. The meaning arrived slowly. This was no longer about sitting in 2A. At the gate, Maris Whitlock arrived at a fast walk. Station manager badge. Black blazer. Short hair. No greeting. She stepped behind the podium. Open the passenger profile. Nora moved to the keyboard. Evan stood beside her. Sylvia remained near the jet bridge entrance. Nora typed Camille's name. The profile loaded halfway, then stopped. A gray box appeared. Access restricted. Governance review profile. Nora's hands left the keyboard. Maris leaned closer. Try again. Nora did. The same message returned. Evan looked at Maris. That does not happen for a seating dispute. Maris took out her phone. Regional Executive Desk. This is Maris Whitlock at Gate 14. I need identification support on a restricted passenger profile. She listened. Her face did not change at once. Then it did. Only slightly. Enough for Evan to see it. Yes, she said. Camille Arden. Another pause. Continental Infrastructure Fund. Sylvia's lips parted. Maris ended the call. The gate area sounded louder now. Suitcase wheels. Low complaints. A child tapping a toy against a plastic chair. Evan asked the question, "Who is she?" Maris looked at the frozen profile on the screen. Chair of the Continental Infrastructure Fund, Review. Nora did not understand fast enough. Evan did. His face went still. Maris continued. Related package. 5 billion. Fleet modernization. Terminal redevelopment. International expansion. The printer stopped. For a moment, the whole gate seemed to notice the silence. Sylvia looked toward the aircraft. Seat 2. A was still empty. Leonard Voss was still inside. The reason field was still blank. And the woman they had removed was now the name on a funding review file. Captain Martin Hale heard the knock while he was speaking to ground control. He covered the headset with one hand and turned. Sylvia Trent stood at the cockpit doorway. Her tablet was pressed against her ribs. Her face had changed. Not enough for the passengers to read from their seats. Enough for a captain to notice. "What now?" he asked. "Station manager wants to speak with you." "We are waiting on paperwork." She said, "Compliance hold." The words did not fit inside the cockpit. Captain Hale removed the headset. He stepped out into first class. The cabin quieted by habit. Passengers could feel when the shape of authority changed. It showed in the way crew stopped smiling, in the way the galley sat became smaller, in the way people looked at one another without turning their heads. Leonard Voss sat in 2B. His safety card was open, but his eyes were on the aircraft door. Captain Hale walked to the threshold. Maris Whitlock stood in the jet bridge with Evan Rourke behind her and Nora Bell to one side. Nora held a printed hold notice in both hands. Maris did not soften her voice. "Captain Hale, departure is under compliance. Hold." Hollis stared at her. "For a seating dispute. For a removal tied to an undocumented passenger preference." Sylvia stiffened behind him. Hale looked back at her once, then at Maris. "My lead attendant reported non-compliance." Maris opened the folder in her hand. "Did you verify the original basis before authorizing security removal?" Hale did not answer quickly. The aircraft ventilation hummed. A passenger in row 3 stopped zipping a laptop case. Leonard Voss lowered the safety card by another inch. Hale said, "We were already delayed. I trusted my crew." Maris nodded once. "Not approval. Record. That will need to be included in your statement." Hale's jaw moved. The sentence had landed. He had trusted a report. He had not checked the reason field. He had not reviewed the seat history. He had not asked Camille Arden why she refused. He had only seen delay. Maris handed him the printed page. Camille Arden. Governance Review Profile. Continental Infrastructure Fund. Related package. 5 billion Fleet and Terminal Modernization Review. Hale read it once. Then again. He did not need every financial term. He understood enough. Sylvia whispered. "She did not say that." Maris looked at her. "She showed you her boarding pass." She asked for the reason. More than once. Sylvia's mouth opened. No answer came. Inside the cabin, Mina Ortiz stood near the forward galley with the service napkins still in her hands. She had not moved them since Camille left. Maris looked toward her. "You were present." Mina swallowed. "Yes." "What did you hear?" Sylvia turned. "Mina." The name came out like a warning. Mina looked at Sylvia, then at the empty seat 2A, then at the tablet in Sylvia's hand. She asked what the instruction was based on. Mina said, "Twice." "No one moved." Mina added, "Quieter." No reason was entered. The statement did not sound dramatic. That made it harder to dismiss. Maris turned back to Hale. "Legal wants crew statements before departure. That will delay the flight." "It already is delayed." A low murmur passed through first class. Leonard Voss stood halfway. "Excuse me, how much longer is this going to take?" Sylvia turned too fast. "Please remain seated." "Mr. Voss." The warmth that had been in her voice earlier was gone. Leonard heard it. So did the passengers. He sat back down slowly. Across the aisle, an older woman closed her book. She looked at him over her glasses. She handled herself better than most people would. Leonard's face tightened. "I had nothing to do with this." The woman held his gaze. "Of course." Then she opened the book again. 2 words. "Enough." At the aircraft door, Maris pointed to Sylvia's tablet. "Open the seat change panel." Sylvia did. The screen loaded. Seat 2A. Original passenger. Camille Arden. Requested move. Manuel. Reason field. Blank. Maris looked at Hale. Then at Sylvia. Then at Evan. Preserve it. Evan entered the command on the gate terminal. The tablet updated. Record. Hold active. Seat history. Crew notes. Gate logs. And security statements retained. Julian Park's security device chimed in the office down the hall. Gareth Cole looked at it. Camille Arden sat across the table. She did not smile. She only read the line upside down. Record hold active. Back on the aircraft. The open seat beside Leonard Voss remained empty. This time, the system was not moving her. It was remembering her. The executive lounge above the terminal was quiet the next morning. No boarding calls reached it. No wheels scraped across tile. No passengers stood in lines, with coats over their arms and phones against their ears. Soft carpet covered the floor. Coffee machines sat behind a glass partition. Rain tapped against the windows in thin lines. Helena Cross arrived first. She carried the full incident file in a black folder. Simon Vale from Legal came next. Ruth Calder from Compliance, followed with a tablet and a yellow pad. Maris Whitlock entered last and closed the door behind her. No assistants. No junior staff. No one to absorb the mistake for them. Camille Arden entered alone. Same navy blazer. Same white blouse. Same laptop bag. Her suitcase rolled behind her with one soft sound across the carpet. Everyone stood. Not because a protocol sheet told them to. Because the room understood too late who had been made to stand the night before. Helena stepped forward. "Miss Arden, thank you for agreeing to meet." Camille shook her hand once. "Good morning." They sat around a low conference table near the window. Below them, aircraft moved through wet light. Ground crews walked in reflective jackets. Passengers boarded other flights without knowing that one empty seat had reached a boardroom. Helena opened the folder. "What happened to you should not have happened." Camille looked at her. Yes, the word was flat. Not forgiveness. Confirmation. Simon leaned forward. "We have reviewed the first records. The manual reassignment was not supported by policy. Your removal was authorized before the original basis was verified. Ruth added. The incident is now under formal compliance review. Camille nodded once. I assumed it would be. She opened her laptop bag and removed a thin folder. She placed it on the table. No hard motion. No theater. Only paper. Inside were copies. The boarding pass for seat 2A. A screenshot of the blank reason field. The security note, with her voluntary departure, added. A short timeline. Names. Questions asked. Answers not given. Maris looked at the screenshot longer than the others. Camille said, I did not document this because I was offended. No one interrupted. I documented it because the language kept changing. She placed one page in the center of the table. First, it was an adjustment. Then cooperation. Then compliance. Then removal. Her eyes moved from Helena to Simon to Ruth. But the fact never changed. A passenger with status wanted my seat environment changed because I made him uncomfortable. Your staff made that preference look like authority. The room stayed still. Rain moved down the glass. Helena's hands rested on the folder. What would meaningful correction look like to you? Camille did not look away. Systems Ruth's pen stopped. Not speeches. Camille said. Not a fruit basket. Not a letter written by legal and signed by someone who was not there. Simon lowered his eyes to his notes. Camille continued. Who can manually change a paid seat? What reason must be entered? Who reviews a removal before security is called? How high-status passenger complaints are screened when they affect someone else's seat or service? She tapped the blank reason screenshot once. And whether a valid question is treated as a question or turned into defiance. That sentence stayed in the room. Maris looked toward the window. Helena asked the question no one else wanted to ask. Have you recommended withdrawal of the funding package? Camille sat back slightly. I have recommended temporary suspension. Simon's face changed by 1 degree. Ruth wrote the words. Temporary suspension. Camille added. Pending governance milestones. No one spoke. The fund is not a reward. Camille said. It is not a punishment either. It is a risk decision. If this was a correctable failure, show the correction. If this was a protected pattern, the money should not move. Helena nodded slowly. What milestones? Camille counted them without raising her hand. Mandatory reason field before manual reassignment. Supervisor verification before security removal. Separate language for safety instructions and customer preference. Bias review for high-status complaints that move another passenger. A plain passenger rights notice. Staff training built around actual decisions. Not slogan. Ruth looked up. Camille finished. And one principle in writing. Helena waited. A valid question is not defiance. The room went quiet again. This time no one tried to fill it. Camille closed her folder. The next person may not have a board review attached to their name. Build the system for that person. She stood. The meeting was not over on the calendar. It was over in the room. At the door. Camille turned once. Do not ask me what apology I want. Ask what reason should have been entered before anyone touched my seat. Then she left. Behind her. The lounge remained silent. On the table. The blank reason field faced upward. By noon. Astor Meridian Airways had stopped calling it a seating issue. The file had a new title. Flight 618. Seat reassignment without documented basis. Ruth Calder opened the compliance file in a training room near the staff corridor. No music played. No announcement was made. Sylvia Trent sat in the second row with her tablet face down on her lap. Captain Martin Hale sat near the wall. Nora Bell sat beside Evan Rourke. Mina Ortiz stood near the back, hands folded in front of her uniform jacket. Ruth placed one sentence on the screen. A valid question is not defiance. No one spoke. Then she opened the timeline. Seat 2. A confirmed. Manual change requested. Reason field left blank. Passenger asked for basis. No basis entered. Crew instruction issued. Security called. Passenger removed. Ruth stopped at the fourth line. This was the door. She said, "The outcome could have changed here." Sylvia looked down. Captain Hale kept his eyes on the screen. Ruth continued. A passenger asked why. The system did not answer. People did. The room stayed still. Later that afternoon, the employee notices went out. Sylvia Trent was removed from lead cabin duty, pending review. Captain Hale entered administrative review for authorizing removal without verifying basis. Nora Bell's manual reassignment access was restricted. Evan Rourke was ordered to submit a supervisory account. Mina Ortiz submitted a supplemental statement. Passenger asked for reason twice before escalation. The statement attached cleanly to the case file. No one clapped for her. No one needed to. Leonard Voss received his notice through the corporate travel portal. Passenger conduct review opened. Corporate preference requests, restricted pending review. Prior seat environment requests attached. He read the notice in a glass conference room. His phone stayed in his hand. No one at the table spoke. The next line loaded by itself. Future seat or privacy requests require documented policy basis. A copy routed to his corporate travel office. Subject line only. Misuse of travel status under review. Leonard turned the phone face down. The screen lit again anyway. At the board level, Helena Cross presented the corrective plan. Margaret Sloan, the board chair, read the first page twice. Her glasses rested low on her nose. The plan was plain. No manual cabin reassignment without a documented policy reason. No security removal for a seating issue without supervisor verification. No use of compliance language for customer preference. High-status passenger complaints would require bias screening if another traveler's seat, service, or access was affected. A passenger rights notice would be written in clear language. Every training file would carry the same line. A valid question is not defiance. One board member asked about cost. Margaret looked at him. So was last night. No one asked again. Ruth opened one more file. Prior preference. Override audit. The list was not long. That made it worse. Several passengers had been moved after high-status complaints. Some records had no safety basis. Some had no medical basis. Some had only words like comfort, privacy, or cabin balance. Margaret read the list without moving her hands. Reopen them, she said. Correction notices were sent. Not apologies written in soft language. Corrections. Your confirmed seat was reassigned without documented policy basis. The record has been amended. Then the software update went live. The manual reassignment screen changed. Before, an agent could type a note after moving the seat. Now the reason field came first. Safety, ticketing, medical, compliance. If none of those fields were selected, the reassignment button stayed gray. If the passenger had already asked for a reason, the screen required supervisor review before any security request could be sent. The Continental Infrastructure Fund did not release the funding package. Not yet. The file status changed to conditional review. First compliance milestone required. The first milestone was not a promise. It was a test. Asta Meridian had to provide the updated tool screen. Retraining records. Reopened. Override files. And proof that the gray button could not be bypassed. Camille Arden received the notice in her hotel room. She read it once. Then she placed it beside the folder with her boarding pass. She did not smile. She only turned the page to the next document. Asta Meridian had attached the record correction. Original seat confirmed. Seat change unsupported by documented basis. Removal escalated before policy verification. She signed the acknowledgement. Not approval. Receipt. Weeks later. Gate 14 operated under the new rule. Nora Bell stood behind the podium. Rain moved down the terminal windows. An older black man in a brown sport coat approached the priority lane. He held his boarding pass in one hand and a worn leather bag in the other. Nora took the pass. She scanned it. The screen showed Seat 1C. First cabin. Confirmed. No alert appeared. No reason field opened. No one behind her asked whether he looked like he belonged there. Nora returned the boarding pass by hand. "You are all set," she said. "Welcome aboard." The man nodded and walked down the jet bridge. At the edge of the podium, the new notice sat under clear plastic. Seat or service changes require documented basis before escalation. No passenger looked at it for long. That was the point. The system did not become fair because it apologized. It became fairer when it finally required a reason before taking something away. This story is fictional. The characters, events, and settings were created for storytelling, educational, and reflective purposes. Any resemblance to real people or real events is purely coincidental.